Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Pine Forest of Albania. The thumbnail for this video was not clickbait. I actually want to talk about a lens today that changed my photography forever. And in a kind of review, I want to talk about 3 lessons that I've learned from this lens that I think have matured me as a photographer. This is me convincing myself that I'm mature. Good, good. Ooh, look at this shroom. Oh yes, that's a nice shroom. Wait, I found another one. Ew. This one's like slimy. All right, let's poke this one. It's very moist. My wife loves that word, moist. Okay, so now that I realize that I just proved to all of you that I'm actually not very mature, the lens that I want to talk about today is this one, the 7Artisans 35mm f.95. Focus. So I thought you might enjoy this shot next to this shroom right here. I don't want to do a full in-depth tech spec review on this lens because these have kind of been reviewed to death on the internet, but I want to talk about what makes this unique and why you may consider buying this. So these are Chinese lenses that share a lot of similarities, as you might be able to tell, with some Leica lenses. These are full manual, so there's no connection with your camera, full manual focus, no autofocus. The build quality and the optical performance on most of these 7Artisan or TTArtisan lenses has been pretty universally praised across the internet. So what makes this different from like a Leica lens or a Zeiss lens? Well, a couple things. Number one, they make these for almost all modern mount cameras. You can get these for the Canon RF, the Fuji X, the Micro Four Thirds, what else is there? The L mount for Leica and Panasonic and Sigma. And the second thing, and I think really the biggest thing, is that these Chinese companies are offering a lens with excellent build quality and strong optical performance at a fraction of the price that you would pay for a Leica lens, and sometimes a third to a quarter of the price that you might pay for something like a Voigtlander. Hi, it's me in the future. Well, I'm here to make an apology. In my Ricoh GR3 review, I absolutely thrashed the video quality of the Ricoh, and I have to admit that the only camera I had available when I was taking those shots of my 7Artisans lens was my Ricoh, and I think they turned out pretty good, and it came through in a pinch for me. So Ricoh, I'm sorry that I trashed you. You did a good job. So let's talk about just this lens in particular now. I bought this for my Olympus camera. Really the reason I bought it was because a lot of my other lenses, when I first bought this system, they weren't particularly fast. And I was like, okay, I want a lens with a fast aperture. That way I can take product shots or maybe get a couple clips for YouTube. But I didn't want to spend a ton of money. So I was looking at these and I'd heard some reviews on them. I was like, okay, I'll give this a try. I don't think I'm going to like it particularly, but it'll give me some versatility if I ever need it. One thing to keep in mind is that because I'm using this 35mm on a Micro Four Thirds body, there's that 2x crop factor to take into account. So this is actually giving you something more like a 70mm short telephoto kind of look. So that's a little bit about the lens. Now let me tell you about my personal experience with it. Let me tell you 3 lessons that this lens has taught me and how this lens became one of my top 3 favorite lenses of all time. So the first lesson that I learned from this lens is that clinical sharpness isn't everything. I will be the first to admit that when I first got into photography and videography, I thought I need the sharpest lens. And I watched endless comparisons of people pixel peeping, comparing one lens to another lens. And I thought it doesn't matter what I have to spend, doesn't matter what credit card I have to max out. I need only the sharpest lenses. When I got this lens in the mail, I was excited about it, put it on my Olympus, and what aperture do you think I was shooting at? Well, of course I was shooting at f.95. If you buy a lens like this, you're not shooting at f8. The results that I was getting were kind of disappointing to me because I knew it wasn't reviewed as the sharpest lens ever, but the results that I were getting were kind of like, to me, unacceptably soft. They definitely had that look, that glow look that photographers talk about when they shoot lenses wide open. It was soft, didn't have a whole lot of contrast, you know. As somebody who demanded the utmost clinical sharpness, I was appalled. But through my disappointment, I kept shooting with the lens, and it grew on me. And I can actually show you the exact image that I took where I learned the lesson that not all good photography and photography that I enjoy and is beautiful to me has to be clinically sharp. It's nothing particularly special. It's a shot of my wife getting ready in the morning, doing her hair. But when I saw that image, I was convinced that this was a lens that I could love. Okay, so now let's talk about the second lesson that I learned, and that was, well, let's talk about my second addiction first. So along with the usual addiction of clinical sharpness in a lens, I had the accompanying addiction, and that is I needed lenses with super wide apertures. Only f1.4 and below, nothing else, because that's what the pros shoot with. And the most artistic photos are those where the background is just destroyed into bokeh blurriness. Well, welcome to the Adriatic Sea. Hopefully the dynamic range on the Olympus can keep up. And I don't really see myself as fitting into one particular genre of photography. I like to shoot all kinds of things, and people and animals, and I live in the city, so I take my camera out on the streets a lot and just shoot anything that I find interesting. One thing this lens has taught me is that low aperture lenses aren't everything, for a couple reasons. As you mature as a photographer, hopefully your composition is getting better. You're actually thinking about the things that are surrounding and included in the image that you're taking, and you're not just isolating a subject, blowing out the background and calling it art. Don't get me wrong, I love my bokeh as much as anybody, but there's a little more to it than that. But the second reason is because it's really hard to shoot any kind of dynamic scene at an aperture less than like 1.4 when you're manually focusing. It's really difficult. So as I've been growing and taking more photographs, one thing I'm realizing, both on my autofocus and manual focus lenses, is that my apertures are actually increasing rather than decreasing. Shooting at a higher aperture allows you to bring more into the scene, more context, more of the surroundings, or whatever you're photographing, which in my opinion, most of the time makes for a richer photo than just a singular isolated subject. Is that subjective? Yeah, 100%, but that's been my experience as I've been taking more photographs. And now the third and the final lesson that I learned from the 7Artisans lens, and that is I like manual focus. And I never expected to. As I mentioned, I really didn't think that I was going to love this lens. It was something I just wanted for utilitarian purposes. So the reasons I've come to enjoy manual focus are a little bit hard for me to describe, but I think it really comes down to control and maybe a little bit of nostalgia. So there's a couple images that I want to show you. The first one I took just today. There was this really nice light on the water right where the waves were coming in on the beach, and there was these colorful pebbles underneath the edge of the water, and I wanted the camera to focus on the colorful petals, but I knew that if I autofocused, the camera would focus on the top of the water, and that's not what I wanted. So with a manual focus lens, I was able to dial it in exactly where I wanted it without having to fidget with any settings or go in and manually adjust from autofocus to manual focus. Hi, it's me again from the future. If you were largely unimpressed by that pebble photo, such as I was when I took a look at it in Lightroom, I have another one that I think illustrates the control of manual focus better than that one. It's an image I took on the way home after I had filmed that clip, and it's of this cat. You know, he was staring me down this alley. I didn't appreciate it, and so I took my camera out and I was like, you're getting your photo take. I'm taking part of your soul with me. So I got him, and you can see how just this narrow little space between the bars and where his eye is, that'd be tough to get even with a single point autofocus with a joystick or something like that, because a lot of those single points aren't specific enough to actually get between those bars. The spaces are often wider, at least with some of my old Sonys, and so manual focus was really the way to go here. I had about half a second before he escaped me. He thought he was going to get away, but he didn't. I've nailed that out with just a quick twist of the focus ring. And then the second reason, which I think is kind of connected to control, but also a little bit of old-timey nostalgia, and that is that it's just nice to work with your hands, to not have to rely on a computer system as much and electronics as much to make your decisions for you, to be able to look at the back of your camera less, fiddle with your dials less, and adjust your aperture and your focus right there on your camera lens, right? It makes it a little bit more of a pure experience. And for me personally, I go out to take photographs a lot of times just to relax, like on a walk like today. And getting away from the electronics and moving to a little bit more of a manual experience is something that I've just found enjoyable, and I never thought that I would. So that kind of wraps it up for our 3 lessons. I'm headed home to eat some lunch. Would I recommend the 7Artisans 35mm 0.95 f.95 lens to you? Well, it really depends on who you are. I hope that through the images that I've shown on the screen that you can get some idea for the image quality. This is what I would say. If you're somebody who maybe has never tried manual focus before, maybe never tried a lens like this before, and you're just interested in mixing it up creatively, I would definitely recommend this to you. And it may end up leading you down a road that you never expected to go. I've recently been purchasing some m-mount lenses that I plan to use and invest in for the long term, and never thought I would be saying that, but here I am. So I absolutely recommend it, not as the technical masterpiece that's going to give you the best image quality of all time, but as a creative masterpiece, perhaps. And that gets me thinking about maybe a bonus lesson that I took away from this, and I'll leave you with this, and that is that it's not always the most expensive lenses that you're gonna enjoy and love the most. I know that the camera marketing people, they want you to believe that if you spend $1,500 on a lens, that's gonna be the lens that you make the best photographs with. It's not necessarily true. Sometimes I find myself trying to talk myself out of loving this lens so much because it was relatively cheap, and I try to tell myself I should love my more expensive lenses more. But that's ridiculous, right? I paid, I think, $180 on eBay for this lens when I bought it. I have no regrets about it. I love it. And I think it's a great lesson that money can't buy happiness and money can't buy creativity, and that dumping a bunch of money on something doesn't necessarily make you better at, whatever creative art you're interested in. Yes, creativity can be enabled by great gear, but we need to learn that not all great gear is expensive gear, and I think this might be something that you really like. So I'm going to leave you with that. If you want to see all the images that I've shot with this camera in higher resolution than YouTube will give you, check out the link to my website down below, and all the images are posted on there as well as a written review. So I hope all of you enjoy your day, and hopefully I'll talk to you soon.